Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this September 1st, 2014 edition of Nightcast. The U.S. Space Agency, NASA, has released some new footage showing a series of powerful solar flares. There have been a number of eruptions on the surface of the sun in the last week. Some have warned that this explosion of energy might have a serious impact here on Earth. The BBC's Tim Allman explains.
For the sun, it's been a pretty busy week, cosmically speaking. Enhanced pictures from NASA's Solar Dynamic Observatory proving the point. You can see here on the left a huge explosion of radioactive material, a solar flare. Over the last few days, there have been more than half a dozen similar eruptions. Look at this image. Particles of superheated energy shooting thousands of kilometres out into space. It's not just about pretty pictures, of course. These solar winds travel through the cosmos and can reach us here on Earth. It's warned satellite communications, power grids, even air travel could be affected if the flares are particularly strong. At the very least, you may get to see a wonderful display like the Aurora Borealis or Northern Lights. This is what happens when solar winds hit the Earth's upper atmosphere. These latest solar flares don't appear to be aimed in our direction, so we can breathe a little easy. But they are an extraordinary sight nonetheless. Tim Allman, BBC News.
And friends, it's not exactly the heavenly signs which are part of the sixth seal. You can see over on the far right side of our chart here, the sixth column where you see the little number 6 and the wording sun, moon, and stars. This is to represent the sixth seal from the book of Revelation, which is depicted as heavenly signs or astro signs, signs in the sun, moon, and stars. And although this opening story is not exactly the heavenly signs we're to watch for, it is in essence, in a sense, it is signs in the heaven. It is things in the heavens. And as the news story reported, it can have serious impact for those of us who live here on good old Mother Earth, as it's sometimes called. Although you look at news stories presently, and it's not always something everybody would say, good old Mother Earth at the moment. News out of Germany. We have next for you, friends, Germany's newest party, the Eurosceptic Alternative for Germany, AfD, has won its first seats in the state parliament of Saxony, according to preliminary results. Chancellor Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats won the vote with 39.5%, according to exit polls. Emily Thomas has the report on this.
Celebrating a breakthrough. This is the first time an anti-Euro party has won seats in a German state assembly. Preliminary results show the Alternative for Germany, or AfD, have come fourth in elections in the eastern state of Saxony.
We are very satisfied with the results because it shows that the AfD is now a steady member of the German political scene and that the Saxony citizens gave us a lot of confidence.
Chancellor Merkel's Christian Democrats, led in Saxony by Stanislav Tillich, won almost 40% of the vote, with the Left and Social Democrats in second and third place. The AfD won 10%, enough to enter Parliament. This is big news in a country where support for the EU has traditionally been strong. The Alternative for Germany isn't even 2 years old, formed in February 2013 as a protest movement against the Eurozone bailouts. The party says it's anti-Euro rather than anti-Europe, and it wants the breakup of the Eurozone. It also wants limits on EU power, with tighter immigration controls another aim. Critics say it caters to nationalist sentiment and attracts right-wing extremists. But it appeals to some Conservative voters who think that Angela Merkel has moved too far to the centre. The Christian Democrat state premier needs to find a new coalition partner after the Free Democrats failed to win any seats. Mr. Tillich has ruled out a coalition with the AfD, but the results will reignite a debate in the CDU over cooperation with the newcomer. The AfD won 7 seats at the European elections in May, and the next 2 weeks could see more scenes like this. The party is likely to win seats in 2 more state elections. It's on the brink of establishing itself as a force in German politics. Emily Thomas, BBC News.
Well, friends, in the United States, there's a couple of things you've heard of that you don't mess with. One is you don't mess with Texas, and 2 is you don't mess with Granny. You don't want to get on the wrong side of your granny in the United States. Well, our next story in Iraq, where things are really very serious there, but there's almost a little bit of humor in the introduction to this next story from there. Iraq grannies, like grandmother, grannies, take on IS in Amerli, or Amerli, Amerli.
Fighters from a local Shia militia are going home at last. They're returning to Amerli after the long siege. The road is open, but it's not secure. Our guides say there are snipers hidden in the villages around. We're skirting round Amerli to the east and trying to come at it from there, because over off to our right there are still pockets of Islamic State resistance. Amerli is a small Shia town surrounded by Sunni villages. Local fighters held out against the Islamists for more than 2 months. But it took an unlikely alliance of Iranian-backed Shia militias, Iraqi military and American air power to finally break the siege. Ali is looking for his family, but they're not at home. He's had virtually no news of his elderly parents since the siege began. Finally, he finds his mother at a relative's home. Then father is reunited with son.
I haven't seen my son for 3 months. My son, I'm his mother. They shelled us from all sides, day after day. They shelled my home.
The defence of Amerli was a collective effort. Boys as young as 10 years old, like Abdullah, have been forced to grow up fast.
More than 1,000 rockets and missiles have landed on our town. They used tanks against us and heavy weapons. And so all of these heroes here, even the children, were carrying Kalashnikovs and organising logistics.
Everyone in this town is still on a war footing. Amid the euphoria of victory, even the grannies fancy a pop at the Islamic State. Amid the palpable sense of joy at the reunification of families and relief that the siege is broken, there's still anxiety here on the streets of Amerli. We're told we shouldn't venture too far over that way because there are still the potential for snipers and shootings here. And this is a town that's only just beginning to come back to life. When the firewood ran out, Jamila stoked her bread oven with cow dung. Then the grain stores dwindled. Then she began digging boreholes, looking for fresh water. And so the appearance today of a truckload of ice felt almost like a miracle. Amerli has been Iraq's biggest victory so far against an opponent that has swept through the country with terrifying speed. But this is just one small town, and the Islamic State is still a powerful force. Gabriel Gatehouse, BBC News in Amerli.
Okay, friends, and of course that story related to the second seal of Revelation, the the red horse of war and rumors of war, as Jesus Christ described it in plain language. Our next story out of Pakistan also relates to this second seal, the red horse. Although it also, if you want to get real technical, it also relates to the fourth seal, the pale horse, because on our chart, as you can see, the fourth seal, the pale horse, although the primary characteristic of this horse, as Jesus Christ described it in plain language via the gospel writers Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he described the activities of this horse whose rider is named Death, and alongside Revelation says Hades, hell, the grave rides. Christ described the primary activity of this horse as loimus, meaning pestilence, disease epidemics, the plagues of Egypt. And for short, we just call it plagues, because plagues can include the next thing that Jesus Christ said would happen between the third seal and the fifth seal. That only leaves the fourth seal, so I peg it as a second category under loimus, the pestilence. Seismus, Jesus Christ said there would be seismic activity, commotions in the airs, gale force winds of all kinds, commotions on the ground, such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, flooding, wildfires, etc., any commotion on the ground or commotion in the air. And Christ also said, only Mark recorded this in the 13th chapter, verse 8 of Mark, Christ said there would be terake, troubled waters, which can be either literally troubled waters or figuratively troubled waters, and the Greek English lexicons give as an example of that mobs and sedition as part of the terake part of that fourth seal. And that's what's happening in Pakistan. It's kind of an internal strife. They want to remove the prime minister of Pakistan. The people are not happy with the prime minister for some reason. And today, the Pakistan army had to step in. To remove anti-government protesters from state TV headquarters in Islamabad. The protesters stormed the building, taking it off the air. Now, they were only carrying sticks and bottles, and the news clip here only mentions the stick welding demonstrators entered the building, and as they did, the newsreader on Pakistan State's TV, you'll hear him in this video report say, "There's no reason to panic," and he urged people to remain calm. The station PTV, Pakistani television, has since resumed its broadcast. Here is a clip of the moment that the demonstrators stormed the broadcasting studio, the TV studio, and you'll hear the announcer tell everybody to remain calm. Here's that part of the report.
These are the latest pictures we've been getting of protesters storming the PTV building in central Islamabad, where they are reported to have smashed up equipment. Well, this was the announcement made by the presenter as the demonstrators entered the studio just before the station was taken off air.
Well, this just in, as we said earlier, protesters have managed to barge their way into PTV headquarters, and they've even made their way into some of the newsrooms, and they're armed with sticks and batons. And the important thing is that we remain calm right now. There's no reason to panic at this stage, and we'll update you with more news as it comes in.
Now, a little bit of this, friends, might be repeated. I've got another video update on this where there have now been clashes between demonstrators and police outside Parliament in Pakistan as the protesters called for the resignation of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Shahzeb Jilani reports.
Angry, violent and determined to get rid of the Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. These protesters met little resistance when they stormed the headquarters of Pakistan's state television. Once inside, they went on a rampage, cutting cable wires, smashing broadcast equipment and harassing staff.
Well, this just in, as we said earlier, protesters have managed to barge their way into PTV headquarters, and they've even made their way into some of the newsrooms, and they're armed with sticks and batons. And the important thing is that we remain calm right now. There's no reason to panic at this stage.
But soon after, troops arrived to clear the building. The protesters welcomed the soldiers and shouted slogans in favor of the Pakistani army. The channel is now back on air, and Pakistani army troops are now guarding this building. But what this incident goes to show is that unless this confrontation is resolved peacefully, things can quickly get out of hand. The Pakistani army has asked the government to resolve the confrontation urgently, but without resorting to use of force. The army's position appears to have emboldened the protesters. Earlier today, they pushed forward towards government buildings, forcing the police to retreat. The protesters now occupy more and more space on this main road in the capital.
पुलिस पे डंडे जो पुलिस वाला चलाता है, जो गोली चलाता है, उसको डंडा भी नहीं चलना चाहिए.
They have these batons with them. He's saying, I've used it on policemen, but in his defense. For now, the standoff continues. The government has said the Prime Minister will not resign, but it is fast running out of options to resolve this confrontation peacefully. Shahzeb Jalani, BBC News, Islamabad.
And friends, the Russian president has given his views on the hopes for peace in Ukraine during an off-the-cuff interview with the BBC's John Sweeney. The brief interview took place behind the scenes during a conference attended by the Russian leader in the Belarus capital, Minsk. Mr. Putin said the process of direct negotiations was, you'll hear him here say, the beginning of a very important process.
What is the essence of the tragedy that is happening now in Ukraine? I think the main reason is that the Kiev authorities do not want to conduct substantive political dialogue with the east of the country. And now is the beginning of a very important process, in my view, the process of direct negotiations. We have been working on it for a long time and agreed with President Poroshenko in Minsk. Such contacts are starting now.
Okay, and that indeed was a very short, off-the-cuff interview. Friends, in our next video, this kind of relates to a verse I've been reading to you from time to time out of Leviticus 16, or Leviticus 19, Leviticus 26, verse 19. Let me turn over there real quick, make sure I'm citing the right verse to you. If we go to Leviticus 26, verse 19, it talks about a great curse for the United States, how we lose the pride of our power. Let's see. I think I want Deuteronomy 26. There's two chapters that we should all be aware of and take a good look at from time to time that mention the blessings and cursings of God. One of them is Deuteronomy 28, and the other is Leviticus 26. God starts out saying, if you obey me, here are all the blessings that you as an individual and collectively all of you as a given nation will receive for obeying your Creator. And then he goes, and after listing all the wonderful blessings, many wonderful, wonderful blessings, make you the head, not the tail, make your agriculture just grow abundantly. One of you will chase 100, and 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. And then he says the other way, if you don't obey me, just the opposite of all that. Instead of being the head, you'll be the tail. Instead of being the lender, you'll be the borrower. And if you still, for all of the things that will happen to you as part of your cursings, if you still refuse to obey your Creator, he says, then not for all this hearken unto me. Then verse 18 says, I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. And verse 19, we're finally getting to the one I was wanting to go to. Verse 19, Leviticus 26. And I will break the pride of your power. And friends, that's what's happening to the United States. And this next story, when it talks about the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is what NATO stands for, NATO, many of you know this already, but I want to emphasize this as we go into this story tonight. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, if some of you haven't been thinking about this lately, or I didn't know that. That's NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Well, I just have to ask you one question. I want you to just stop and focus, concentrate and focus on this, the impact of this next story. The people have formed their own nation here, and of course Canada is north of us. That's part of the North Atlantic. But basically, NATO is a United States organization. It represents the interest of North America, the United States. And the present administration of the United States, it seems, could care less about NATO and NATO's interest of long ago, and even future interest. And it's sad to see that in today's news, friends, let me see, just one moment, I got to take a quick look. All right, I missed the 20-minute break for Facebook again tonight, so we're going to work something out, because I may just start putting a link on Facebook to the whole program. Facebook has a 20-minute limit on videos. Excuse me. So I have to snip the video off at 20 minutes and then put a link to the rest of the video, or to the whole video, where you can see it online for the convenience of those who watch from Facebook. Now, we're back on YouTube with our full-time thing on YouTube. We had a copyright issue we had to deal with because of a report we played an India television people put out, and thankfully the Constitution of India, Section 52, and also or Section 52 of the Articles of Copyright for India, and also I think it's Section 19 of the Constitution. I had the attorneys look that up for us. Are more express and explicit for newscasts produced out of India having fair use than the United States. The United States, there's a gray area. You really got to wobble through it carefully. And the videos we play for you here are under license from the BBC News, so I don't have to worry about those unless they've got music in them that we may not individually have licensed. I have to be careful to watch for that. But otherwise, we got a strike because of that, and it took us off our long videos. We're back on, so I may just put the YouTube videos back on Facebook, although I believe they don't show as well there. We will try that tonight. I think I'm going to just try putting a link to YouTube, since I missed the 20-minute thing here. And we're still figuring out how we'll best do that. If any of you have comments, I'm very open to it. But we were just talking about how NATO is a United States interest, and Ukraine has asked NATO to come on board to help them. And a little bit, it strikes me as being a little bit too little, too late to try to come on, for NATO to come on board now against Russia. But in this next story, you'll see how NATO is saying they're going to assemble a readiness force in response to Russia's actions over the Ukraine.
A readiness action plan to make NATO more agile than ever. We will develop a very high readiness force able to deploy at very short notice. This spearhead would be provided by allies in rotation and could include several thousand troops ready to respond where needed with air, sea and special forces support. This will require reception facilities on NATO territory and pre-positioned equipment and supplies, command and control and logistics experts. So this force can travel light, but strike hard if needed. Honestly speaking, we must face the reality that Russia does not consider NATO a partner. We can see in Russian military documents, we can listen to statements from Russian political leaders that they consider NATO an adversary. I strongly regret that, because I do believe that the right thing for Euro-Atlantic security would be to develop a strong partnership with Russia. But of course, we cannot afford to be naive. We don't have any illusions. We are faced with the reality that Russia considers us an adversary, and we will adapt to that situation.
Okay, friends, Ukrainian forces have withdrawn from the airport of the eastern city of Luhansk following clashes with pro-Russian rebels, military officials say. The announcement came after the two sides were engaged in all-night fighting. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has urged negotiators meeting in the Belarus capital Minsk to make an immediate ceasefire their priority. Mike Wooldridge reports.
In the Restiv region, now at the center of a progressively intensifying diplomatic crisis, pro-Russian separatists prepare to fight. One of their leaders said they were heading to Donetsk airport, shut at the end of May after heavy clashes between the rebels and government forces. It's been under the control of the military ever since. Despite the charge by the US and Europe that Moscow's now sent its own troops into Ukraine, today the Russian foreign minister, ahead of a meeting about the Ukraine crisis in Minsk, repeated Moscow's denials of involvement. There will, he said, be no military intervention.
Today's negotiations will be primarily dedicated to an imminent and unconditional ceasefire. Russia will do everything to help move towards a political, peaceful resolution in Ukraine and take into account the interests of all regions and political powers, without exceptions.
For now, though, international concern focusing on the new push by the pro-Russian rebels in the southeast of Ukraine, which has led to the defences being reinforced around the key port city of Mariupol. It's only a relatively short distance from the swathe of territory seized by the separatists in recent days. Residents of Mariupol took to the streets on Sunday to protest and to pray for peace. Australia today stepped up its sanctions against Russia.
I want to make it absolutely clear, Madam Speaker, that the bullying of small nations by big ones and assertions that might is right should have no place in our world.
And in the latest development on the ground, Ukrainian officials say their troops have retreated from the airport close to this, the rebel stronghold of Luhansk, after coming under artillery fire. Mike Wooldridge, BBC News.
Hey friends, that's it for this Monday night report on Nightcast. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow evening, Tuesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying Happy Labor Day and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.